Every angler has a spinning rod. It doesn't matter what species you're fishing for, if it's bass, if it's catfish, if it's bluegill, if it's walleye. Every angler has a spinning rod. Today we're going to talk about putting line on that spinning rod and the things that you can do to alleviate some of the problems that you might run into. I'm Andrew, this is Stash and Bass. Let's dive right in. Welcome back to Stash and Bass. Today, I'm hopefully going to help you understand a little more about the whys and hows of putting line on your spinning rod. We're going to go over some of the tips and tricks to be a more efficient angler while you're out on the water. But first, if you enjoy this content and you want to check out more content like it, please consider hitting the subscribe button down below. It really helps the channel out. So I already covered putting line on your bait caster a little bit earlier last year. So today we're going to talk about the tried and true, never going to let you down spinning rod. Some of you may have went out to Walmart and bought a cheap combo that already has line on it. That's fine, you can watch this video too. You're going to have to change that line eventually. But if you went out and bought a rod and a reel and you made the combo yourself, you're going to want to get this part down immediately. The first thing you want to decide is what type of line that you want to use. Now understand these are just my opinions. You're welcome to your own, but you're right. The first type of line we're going to talk about is monofilament. I'm going to start out by saying that I never use monofilament for anything other than backing. We'll cover backing a little bit later on in this video. Monofilament is cheap and it floats, and it may be your choice for line if you're fishing something on top water. Mono also has a very strong memory, so it's going to give you that slinky feel when it comes off your reel much sooner than fluorocarbon or braid would. The second type of line we're going to talk about is fluorocarbon. I use fluorocarbon more than any other line currently. To me, it's the equivalent of a medium heavy bait caster with a 7-to-1 gear ratio. It's good for just about anything. I'll put fluoro on my bait casters about 80% of the time unless I'm fishing some topwater frogs or getting into some pretty heavy cover. Fluorocarbon is strong, and although it doesn't stretch as much as mono, it does stretch some. Fluorocarbon also sinks in the water unlike mono and braid, so it's really good for crank, chatterbait, swim bait type situations, anything moving. My general rule of thumb is if I fish something and it's going to sit at the bottom and I'm going to work it really slow, braid's perfectly fine for that, but if I'm going to be fishing something that's moving, fluorocarbon's typically my choice. Now, as great as I think fluorocarbon is, I rarely keep it on my spinning rod setups. I specifically use my spinning combos for finesse applications, so I'm using them more for wacky rigs, drop shots, Ned rigs, things like that. If I'm going to be using something that requires a powerful hook or something, I'm typically not going to be using my spinning combo. I can't remember the last time that I threw a crank or a chatterbait on a spinning rod. I've just always preferred them in a medium light setup. So for that reason, I run a braid to a fluoro leader. The reason that I like braid is actually pretty simple. It's really strong, it has zero stretch, and it's the most sensitive of the three line types. And the reason that we run a fluoro leader on it is for line visibility. Fluoro and mono are transparent, where the braid's visible to the fish. I don't personally know how much fish notice the line, but it makes me feel better. So now that we know what type of line we're going to use, let's keep moving. I mentioned backing line earlier, and I'm sure some of you are still scratching your heads. Braided line can be very expensive, so to limit the use, I use a cheaper line as the backing for about 60% of my spool. You tie that on with an FG knot, the same as you will your leader, and you're ready to go. So let's get this set up. Get me away from you. The first thing we're going to do is feed our backing line through the eyelets of the rod. Before you tie the line to the reel, pay attention to the way that the line is coming off the spool, because you want it to go on the reel the exact same direction because it holds line memory. So we're going to flip our bell. And then I don't usually tie a knot around my line. What I'll typically do, I'll just take the sticker off of the line and then I'll just attach it that way. I've been doing this way for years and I've never had any issues, so you can tie your fancy knots. So now that we have our line tape, we'll flip the bell down and we'll start reeling. Now you want to make sure with any line, whenever you're reeling it onto your spool, that you keep tension on the line. You don't want it to go on too loose. Now that we're at 50 to 60% backing, we're going to cut the line and then add our braid with an FG knot. Most anglers tend to use one of three connecting knots: the double uni knot, the Alberta knot, or the FG knot. If you guys would like me to make a video explaining these three connecting knots, let me know in the comments and I'd be happy to do so. Alright, now that we've got our leader line tied, what was I going to do? Now that we got the FG knot tied, we can continue reeling in until our spool is full. You're going to keep the same tension as you did with your backing line, and you're just going to keep reeling until it's full. Just keep in mind that the fuller your spool is, the better distance you're going to get, but you're going to be more susceptible to wind knots. The same goes in reverse. The less line you have, the less distance you're going to get, but you're going to be able to fight those wind knots a little bit better. Now we will cut the braid and we will do another FG knot for our leader line. Now there's a lot of talk about how long your leader line needs to be. The general rule of thumb is if you want something a little on the lengthy spectrum, just take your line, wingspan here, another wingspan there, and that's how long your leader line needs to be. Now I typically like to run it a little bit shorter, so my leader line is about the length of my rod. So now that we've got our knot tied, I will reel it in until I can see the knot, and then that's where I'll cut and I'll tie on. I do that simply because when I cast, I don't want it to come out of my reel and come up through this. The basic key is just to have this line on for your visibility and still have the strength and the sensitivity of the braid. Now also I want to say that the leader line specifically depends a lot on your visibility of the water that you're fishing. If you got clear water and you got high visibility, this is what you need. You don't want the fish to be able to see the braid. Now if you're in dark, muddy water, the visibility is just a couple feet, you can really just throw a straight braid. You don't need the leader line. The fish at that point are feeding more off vibrations than they are sight. I hope that helps you guys out, and that maybe even some of you learned something. I know this is a short video and kind of to the point. And if you did enjoy the video, hit that like button. Please consider subscribing. Hit that bell, get notifications anytime I put out anything new. Until next time, guys, get out there and go fishing. We'll see you.